incredibly extensive background that I won't get into right now, but she used to teach in Bali at Yoga Barn, and she had a really strong presence, in Bali, and, was definitely one of the more popular yoga instructors, there when she was around. She's now back down in Arizona with her son, Charlie. But when I first heard, I first knew Denise but only as a yoga instructor. And then I found out this work that she was doing at Karabokan prison. And it is really a remarkable story. And it's quite moving. And it's hard to not kind of see the humanity in the world when you listen to her talk about this story. So we wanted to bring her on to talk tonight. And so that is where we are. And so let's just give a really nice, big, warm welcome to Denise. Okay? So there you go.
All right.
Please, can you start recording? Sorry.
Because now I start recording?
Yes, please.
Okay, recording is started again.
All
okay.
Right. Thank you for that really nice introduction. And thank you again for having me here. It is, it is a remarkable story, and sometimes I forget that I'm a part of it. It's so much happened in a course of those years that I was there that sometimes I forget that it's my story. So I'm really happy to be here and to share a lot of my experiences that I had there. I'll start with just, I reached out to a few of my friends that I thought might be here tonight, and I said, so if you were listening to me talk about the jail, what would you want to hear about? And they said, I want to know, what did it feel like the first time you went in there? And, and that's exactly where I would want to start this story, because it was really one day I was having a coffee somewhere, and I got a text message from Myuran Sukamaran, and whom I had no idea who he was at the time. And it just said, "Hi, this is Mayu. Do you want to start teaching yoga in Karabokan?" And I went okay. I mean, it was, I feel like I showed up in Bali kind of randomly a year earlier than that. And then I received this random message. And then once I discovered who it was, I realized, oh, this is why I'm here. This must be what randomly led me to Bali. So it was, through a course of a few text messages, and maybe some of you don't know who Myuran Sukamaran is, but he was one of the, had one of the lead roles in the Bali 9. He was one of the 2 that were executed. It's just been 5 years. April 29th was the 5-year anniversary. And so it was, I really had to do some research and figure out who this guy was. And then once I started Googling and finding out who he was, I thought, I'm just going to stop, because I really don't want to know anything. I just want to start this program, and with no preconceived ideas about who this person was. Some of you may know Joanna Witt, and she had already started a very successful program in Karabokan with one of the other members of the Bali 9, in fact. And if you guys don't know who the Bali 9 is, I'll just Google it later, and it's another fascinating story in and of itself. But he was one of the other members, and she had started a really successful silver smithing jewelry program with him. And it's still going on to this day. It's called Mule's Jewels. And what I found out after a few text messages with Mayu was that Joanna was in the prison one day, and Mayu saw her and said, "Hey, do you know any yoga teachers?" And I had kind of randomly met Joanna, and she goes, "Yeah, there's this great teacher named Denise, and here's her number." So it all just kind of fell together so randomly, but yet everything was in order. So planning that first day in there, we texted a lot, and I found out that they needed mats and they needed a lot of things to start this program. So I went to the owners of the yoga barn and said, I'm going to start teaching yoga at Karabokan. And Karabokan is known as the most notorious prison in Southeast Asia. A lot of books written about it, Hotel K, Snowing in Bali, lots of famous famous celebrity inmates are there. And a lot of great stories about them too. And so I went to the yoga barn and said, I need some yoga mats. And they ended up giving me like 40 old mats that, you know, to start this program. And so, you know, I go down there the first day and it was really just this unknown. I was going by myself and I was going to be meeting this death row inmate. And I had literally like 40 yoga mats stuffed into this big black trash bag. And so I go in and I'm carrying this big thing on my shoulder, this black trash bag knotted up, and it could have been anything in the world. And the guards, you know, I told them who I was, and Mayu was kind of at the down at the end of the hallway where visitors would come in, and I'm carrying this huge thing, and the guards let me in, and I kind of breezed past them, and I thought, I could be carrying anything. This is outrageous. And so you know, it was like a couple of waves of emotions and thought where I thought, is this just a shit show or whatever? Can I just bring anything in here? But what I came to realize was that the dedication that Mayu had put into creating relationships and developing respect with the guards, that they had such an incredible level of respect for him that they completely trusted whoever he was bringing in there. So, but it really took me a while to understand this. I just thought, like, this place is a free for all, man. But it wasn't. I mean, it kind of was, but it wasn't really. So it was in the beginning of the program, I didn't really understand why he wanted me there and what he really wanted out of it. So I just thought Mayu wanted to do yoga. In the beginning of those classes, I had like 40 people attending, and they were allowing it to be mixed groups at the time. And I apologize if my aircon just went on and if it's loud now, but hopefully you guys can still hear me. Okay. So in the beginning, it was mixed groups. It was men and women were allowed to come in, and it was one of the few programs where they let it, you know, where they allowed it to be co-ed programs. And the room was packed, and everybody was so loving and warm and generous and considerate of my time that it quickly became, it was like the best day of my week, you know, like very shortly into this program where I was, you know, it was kind of the gamut of these celebrity inmates and some death row inmates, and then a lot of the local people that were in there. And most everybody is in there for smuggling drugs anyway. That it just is what it is. A couple of older women in there, you know, serving time for stealing a chicken to feed her family or something. But for the most part, it was just a bunch of drug smugglers, but foreigners and local people alike. And, you know, they just were so dedicated, and I didn't really know how to approach it. I just thought, well, maybe I should be starting from the beginning. Then I thought, you know, let's just really get some work done. And the next thing I knew, within 4 weeks, they were doing handstands and arm balances. And it was like, it was a 2-hour class. And it was like the best, sweatiest, hardest classes ever. And I would give homework, and they would work on their homework, and I would show up the next week, and they would go, oh, Ibu Denise, look what I can do now. And they would just show me all their, you know, little arm balances and crow pose and everything. And, you know, the relationships between the prisoners and the guards was always very interesting. And, you know, and after being there for 6 years, you know, I watched a lot of things change throughout that time. But I have to say, you know, the first year was the best year doing it, because it was a co-ed group and it was a lot of people. There were some guards that would kind of circle around the group when I was teaching. And there were 3 guards in particular, and they would sit around and they would smoke cigarettes and they would just watch me teach yoga. So I thought, well, if I'm teaching yoga to all these other guys, you know, then let's just get the guards involved. And I talked to Mayu about this, and he was like, I don't think so, but you do whatever you want. So I started inviting the guards in to do the practice with the inmates. And the next thing I knew, I had guards taking their shoes off, doing yoga in socks with their cigarette packs on their mat. And it was just like this environment where you couldn't even, you couldn't have made up some of the things that happened in those classes. And it was, you know, we all laughed, the guards and the prisoners and me, we all laughed together. And it was just such a weird dynamic. I would leave the classes and drive back to Ubud and just feel like, you know, I felt it all was so surreal, because it's not just regular prison yoga, you know, it's not like any old jail. This is like a real hellhole that we're doing yoga in. Like you can't even believe the conditions that I was teaching in and that these people live in. So it's just such a surreal atmosphere, but everybody still shows up with these open hearts, ready to do handstands and do whatever I say and hug and love me. And, you know, you know, it was kind of this code of honor that I had to not ask anybody what they were doing time for. So we all just became a bunch of people that were doing yoga together. And it was just the best experience. One of the things that I wanted to share was when it comes to the guards is because they always had cigarettes. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to teach these guys how to smoke more meaningfully. And so I started doing smoking workshops for the guards, and some of the, I see Christine laughing. I started doing these smoking workshops because I thought smoking comes from grief. And so if you're going to smoke, because that's the only time you can get a deep breath in during the day, then let's do it with more meaning behind it. And I actually would sit down with these guards and I would teach them how to smoke more mindfully. And they would practice taking deep inhales and deep exhales with the smoking, and and learning how to sit with good posture, and to not just walk around randomly and smoke, but to really say, okay, I'm going to take this time out to sit down and smoke a cigarette. And they really followed this protocol for a long time. And they thanked me, and it was just, it was just like so fucking weird sometimes. But it was really good. So then about a year into the program was the first big riot, right? So there was a huge riot in the jail. And I'll tell you the story of do you guys want to hear about the day of the riot? I actually was there, all right? So I was teaching a class. It was a Tuesday. And I was teaching a class, and the day was weird. There were about 40 people in the class. Mayu didn't practice that day. He was kind of pacing back and forth. There were a lot of other prisoners kind of pacing around. It was really weird. And so we got finished with the class. I have everybody in Shavasana, the final resting pose. And usually we sit there, we stay in that for about 5 or 10 minutes. And right as I got everybody into this resting pose, I closed my eyes and I had a vision of someone coming up behind me and putting their arm around my neck and stabbing me in my rib cage. And I opened my eyes and I said, okay, you guys, have a good one. And I left. And 2 hours later, the riot started, and they burned that mother effer down, man. And so it was a long break before we could have classes again. And then they split us up. We couldn't have co-ed classes anymore. So then it was just the men that I was teaching to. And that went on for like another 4 years. It was pretty incredible. The yoga program, you know, I talked a little bit earlier about like, what was it even for? Why did Mayu even start it? And I do want to give him a lot of credit, because it wasn't really just yoga for him. What I realized later, it was that he dedicated, you know, the last 5 or 6 years of his time in Kobukan to creating programs that would serve others and would give people tools to have, you know, something valuable, you know, or at least a sense of self-worth if they, you know, for when they got out, or even if they never got out, but really stuff to do. He started over 40 different programs inside the jail. So yoga was interesting, but it was like, you know, minuscule and compared to some of the other programs that he started. He built an entire library and a computer lab and a t-shirt business and graphic arts studio and a whole bunch of stuff. But it was a real blessing for me to be able to work with him. And when it got closer near the end, I was just doing one-on-one privates with Mayu. We didn't have any group classes anymore. So for about the last 3 or 4 months before he got transferred, we were doing privates. Yeah. So do you guys, let's see, let me see what else I was gonna talk about. Yeah, that's really about it. I mean, there's like, I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have. Hopefully you have some questions, and there's no questions are off limits here. You can ask me anything you want.
Well, that's great. Well, first of all, thank you, Denise, for sharing that. And so
yeah, appreciate it.
A bit of a
thank you.
And
Yeah.
And just kind of bringing in and sharing the story. And so now, so if people do have questions, we're not a huge group. There's about 25-ish people on here. If you know how to use your little hand feature, you can just raise your hand, or
Okay.
if you just put on the chat that you just want to, then I will call you out. But I mean, I just wanted to maybe just ask the first question in terms of how have you, and it's a rhetorical question because I know how you, but you know, could you share sort of how you felt when your two friends, you know, were executed, and what was happening as you knew that that was coming up, and then sort of what happened afterwards?
Yeah, I you know, I'm really happy to talk about it. I actually haven't spoken publicly about the execution at all. So this is the first time, and I'm really, really happy to do it. It was, you know, when one of my best friends is Dr. Peggy, who has a clinic in Bali, and she said something profound to me that kind of made everything better. She said, the nervous system wants things to make sense, and this is never going to make sense. So it really gave me permission. The situation with the execution was, there were two of us. He also had a painting teacher, Tina K. Bailey, if you guys know who she is. So when Mayu got moved, it was a really abrupt move to Execution Island, Nusa Kambangan. And his brother called and said, you know, why don't you guys come up and visit him? And so we flew up, and I don't even remember what day it was, but we flew up, maybe it was a Thursday, and visited him. And he was already doing portraits of all of the guards in the jail, and making friends with everybody, and just doing whatever he could to make people feel more comfortable. Like, he's in my bio as one of my teachers because I learned so much from this guy. So we visited him, and then we flew back, and it was on a Saturday, I think. And then I got a call the minute we landed in Bali. His brother called me and said, he just got a 72-hour notice. You guys need to get back here right now. And we like literally turned around and went right back to the airport and flew back. And so we saw him on a Monday, and then spent the day with him there on Monday. And then Tuesday, he was only with his immediate family. And so from that point on, after that point, I was with his family during the actual execution. And I had started a campaign that you guys may know about called Handstands for Mayu. So one of the things that someone asked Mayu was, when you're shot, because they kill by firing squad, and they said, do you want to be standing or sitting or kneeling? And he said, I just want to be doing a handstand. And so he was kind of joking, but you know, he's like, I actually don't want to be shot at all, to tell you the truth. So I started this campaign, Handstands for Mayu, and got a lot of people worldwide involved in it, and everybody would post pictures of themselves doing handstands with the hashtag Handstands for Mayu, just to bring awareness. And being with that was kind of a side note, but being with the family and not speaking about it until tonight, actually publicly, it's almost like, you know, it's like this really big secret that you just, you know, you're kind of sworn to secrecy about these things. When I got back to the yoga barn, the owner said, how do you feel about being here, knowing that the president of this country, you know, shot your friend? And it all just became very surreal. But I feel like, you know, if I practice what I preach, which is everything really in divine order? And does everything have meaning to it? And is there a purpose? And then I have to realize that the purpose of that was for him to really teach people how to die before they die. And that's really what he did. So I guess where I am now with it 5 years later is I still feel like he touched so many people in a profound way, where if you can get a firing squad to hold off, even though they've been given the go ahead, because the person being shot isn't done singing, then I think you've lived quite a profound life, you know, and he's really impacted people in a lot of ways. So I would say the lesson and how I feel about it is really just like, learn how to die before you die, you know?
Wow. Yeah. Thank
and
you.
I want to thank Christine. She's here, my friend, because she was with me through quite a bit of that. And she's one of my dearest friends, and I call her the Christian. And let me just tell you, man, that girl can pray. So thank you.
That's nice. Well, so I just have one question from Kim. She just wrote on there. Then Sally, and then I see Joe has a question. Okay. So the question from and thank you for that. I think we could probably spend hours just on that whole part of it. But thank you for sharing on that with us. Yeah. And but Kim was asking, you know, when you taught the mindful smoking to the guards, did you teach it in English, or did you? I mean, I can't remember if you speak Bahasa Indonesian or not. I do.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do.
So how did you communicate to them? Then after that, Sally, you're on for your question.
Yeah, I did speak in Indonesian. I did speak Bahasa with them, and Mayu helped because he spoke fluent Bahasa. And it turned out to, you know, into kind of a weekly session for about 6 months. We would just do these smoking classes. It was pretty awesome. Yep.
Hi, Denise. Hi, I'm Sally. Firstly, thank you for such a fascinating insight. What an incredible thing this is that we get to speak to each other from all over the globe. And thank you so much for sharing what is a pretty phenomenal experience in your life. And so, yeah, it's pretty cool to be able to, you know, connect like this. So firstly, thank you. And secondly, I'm most interested in, I share your kind of paradigm of thought of, you know, understanding that there's nothing really random. Everything often seems really random, but there's a divine or innate order beneath the apparent chaos that, you know, if you go looking for it, you can find. But what I'm really interested in, you know, people hate to talk about death always. It's the thing that we all shy away from and we don't know how to embrace it. Is to see, did you see a change? Well, I mean, I guess you did, but it'd be interesting to kind of see your perspective on the mindset that Mayu had across the years that you knew him from, and as he approached, you know, the time that he had to go and leave the prison, how did that impact him? You know, we've read so much in the media about it. And it would be really fascinating if you want to share, you know, how you saw his mindset kind of change, because from our perspective, and I was in Australia at the time, he came across as a guy that was completely, you know, obviously he didn't want to die, but he had prepared himself so well for what was in front of him. So I'd just be really interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it was a really, I mean, it was an honor to witness what he went through and how he prepared for that. You know, so much of the energy for the few months before he was moved, I mean, they knew they were getting down to the wire, and they knew that the president wanted to make a statement. Like, he had already made that really clear, and that Andrew, Chan, and Myuran were going to be the statement, you know, that the President Chakotay was going to make. So for those few months before he got moved, his family was there a lot, and that's when I was doing privates with him. And there was a lot of really deep emotion and tears, you know, really deep feelings that would come out during the private yoga sessions, and that, you know, didn't need to have a name to them at all. They just were just him getting, you know, really releasing a lot. And when his family was there, there was a lot of pressure because he wanted to make sure that they were okay. And it's not like they imposed that pressure on him, but it was a large family that was there, and they would visit him every day. And it was a lot of managing for him to go through that, and he was happy to do it. I think that there was so much pressure building up to it that once he did get moved, I mean, they came in at 2 o'clock in the morning and dragged him out in handcuffs. There was no warning at all. And so once he got to Nusa Kambangan, I think everybody was still kind of optimistic in a way. You know, the campaigns were really strong still. His lawyer was still fighting for him, and the Mercy campaign, everything that was going on. I mean, it was a huge ordeal. It was this big, you know, it was a circus around him all the time, around him and Andrew. And I think that he just really shifted into, how can I make everybody feel more comfortable about this? And that is, in my view, that's what got him through it and really elevated him to a place where it still just wasn't about him anymore. He, you know, he became very, very connected to his Christian beliefs. And those last 72 hours, I don't know if you guys know that for the last 72 hours, when they said, "What do you want, Mayu?" And he said, "All the canvases and painting supplies I can get." And I don't know if, Sally, if you've seen any of the shows that have, if you've seen any of his gallery shows with the work of the last 72 hours, but I think you can find them online. It's a real profound process that he went through painting. From, you know, they're all self-portraits that he did. And the final painting that he did was the flag of Indonesia, which is red and white horizontal stripes with like red dripping down along the front of it. And so like Indonesia's bleeding. It was pretty intense. But I will tell you about that Monday when I spent the day with him in Nusa Kambangan with his family, and I'll tell you what he did. Which is really where I just went like, shit, man, when I grow up, I want to be like Mayu. So what he did was, there was a big ramada, and all of the condemned inmates had family visiting that day. So it was all spread out in this big area. And so Mayu was with his whole family, and he had cousins and aunts and uncles and his brother and sister, and everybody was there. And so we had this big meal together, and he laughed, and his whole family reminisced about his childhood, and they all, you know, laughed and cried and ate and told stories. And then Mayu he had this whole thing planned, and he put a couple of chairs at a distance with 2 chairs next to each other and 1 chair facing. And I noticed that he just started taking his family members 2 at a time over to the sitting area, and talking to first his brother and his brother's wife, and you know, and down the list, his cousins, and giving them counsel on how to deal with their grief once he had been killed. I mean, try to hold it together here, people. So yeah, so that's what he did. And he counseled everybody, including myself and Tina. So we were the last ones. He came over to a different area and stood with us and said, you guys have to keep the prison, all the programs going, and, you know, you need to do this and that, and you're going to be fine, and everything's, you know, just counseling us on how to kind of manage the situation once it was over. So, and then that song, 10,000, what's the name of the song, Christine? What's the name of the song? 10,000, oh shit, I can't think of the name of it. And then Amazing Grace. So they sang this one song, and then they sang, once they were all zip tied to these crosses where they were executed, they were singing Amazing Grace, and the firing squad got the call to do it, but they weren't finished yet. And then once they were finished singing, then they were all shot. There were 9 of them. But the process really was in, you know, him continuing to serve others and to make sure that everybody was okay. And it was just a really incredible experience to, you know, you learn so much from that level of service, you know. I hope that answers your question.
That more than answers my question. I basically can barely speak. It's just phenomenal. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you. He's, you know, I think when you're faced with your mortality, how it then changes you as a person. And
yeah.
So that was what was so phenomenal about what we've heard about him in those years and weeks and days leading up to what he was facing. Just,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it was a real firsthand experience, and just you know, when Christy Buckingham was his spiritual counselor during this time, and so she was with him, you know, right as they walked out into the field, and right as he was, you know, zip tied to this cross, and you know, and she's even said that he just, you know, kept saying, like, you know, are you okay? And it's just, yeah, you really figure out that, you know, that's the way you want to do it. You know, if given, you know, a choice, then that's really how to be prepared for it. Because we're all going to go sometime. So if we can learn how to go on our terms and go gracefully, then I think that that's the best thing that can come from this whole thing.
Wow. Well, thank you for, thank you for that. And that's a great question, Sally. Thank you for asking that. Yeah. So we have Joe has a question, and then Anne has a question after that as well too. And if others have questions, just feel free to raise your hand or just put it up on the chat, and we'll go through that. So Joe.
Hi, Denise.
Hey, babes. How are you?
Oh my God, I have no idea how you're speaking and not a blubbering mess.
I'm like twisting the skin on my thigh.
Oh.
I'm just kidding. No, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Okay. So, because it's interesting, I can't remember what I had for dinner yesterday, and yet your experience when you were sharing it at the time is seared into my brain. And I think it's very much because of just how much love and how amazing Mayu is, like it, like just that, I just such a loss. And so the whole time you're speaking, I can't remember anything, but I can remember in detail what you told me, and that just, I mean, how much he was thinking of other people, and even that woman in the Philippines, he's thinking of her.
You know, it was so, you know, and I don't want to interrupt you, but I do want to, I'll share that story after you ask if you have a question. I'll share that when you're done.
Well, I wanted you to share that one. And then
Yeah.
the other detail that stuck with me was him. I think he bought pizza for the guards.
Yeah, I can share that story.
And that they were basically guards that cared about him, right? That had to shoot him.
Yep.
Anyway, and then I guess it's a bigger discussion on what, and then the other one was him trying to protect people during the riots.
During the riots, yeah.
Like
Yeah, during the riots, during that first one, about a year into the yoga program, I mean, that was a big one, man. And he was guarding the gates and the doors to the women's block because all these men were trying to get in to basically rape the women. And he was like, he guarded all of the women in the women's block so that they couldn't get in there. It was pretty intense. What was the other question? So the night, yeah, so the night that of the actual execution, it was like at 2:39 in the morning on the 29th. So that night before that, for his last meal, they asked him what he wanted, and he said, I want pizza enough for everybody in the jail and for the guards. And so they ordered pizzas, and all the condemned men, and at that time there was one woman from the Philippines who was going to be executed that next day, and they all ate pizza together. Now I actually met that woman, and Mayu adamantly every day would go to the warden at that jail and said, please do what you can to spare her life. She's young, this shouldn't be happening to her. And right up until his final minutes of life, he was fighting for that woman to not be executed. And in fact, as they were walking down out to the field, she was pulled at the last minute. And it was right up until Mayu's last breath that he was fighting for that woman's life. And unfortunately, he didn't know that she was pulled from the line as they were walking out to the killing field. But that's how he spent his last days, was fighting for her and feeding everybody and painting. Joe, you had another part to that question? I don't remember what it was though.
I can't remember either, but that I think Anne's following me. I'll talk more later.
Yeah,
And
I was really lucky. The paintings that Mayu did were all still wet because they were all oil painting. It had been done in a 72-hour window, and so Tina was able to manage all of that. And Christy Buckingham was with him as his spiritual counselor, and I was with the family in the safe house, and we were all so separate and all in charge of such different elements of it. It was and same thing, Joe, like I don't remember what I ate today, but I remember every minute of it. I remember the room we were in, and when we got the call, and the wailing sounds, around me of the family. And it was just, it's like it's seared into my mind. It took, and I'll be really honest with you guys, because it was quite, I was in shock, I think, for like 2 years before I could even, like think about it or not have visions of it. Like, I think there was a real sense of PTSD that came from that experience that 5 years later, I kind of feel okay. So.
One more quick question.
Well,
how about the movie?
Well, maybe why don't we go? We'll go to Anne, because then Sandra has a question, and then we'll come back to you then to Joe. And we have time too. Everybody, please don't feel like you can't ask questions. Please ask away. So go ahead, Anne. But Anne, I'm not going to let you ask your question unless you go on video, because I want to see you. Damn it.
I'm at the end. So first, Denise, thank you. It's just an incredible story. And like Joe, I was with you when you couldn't talk about it. I was with you when you started talking about it, and it still just blows me away, the story of grace. And I'm quite sure that Maya, he is in heaven or in the quantum field or wherever he is also praising you for the role that you played. The
Yeah.
question is, you lovingly mentored both of our daughters through your yoga teacher training and have changed their lives forever. Becca went on to teach yoga in a prison around the corner from her college for 4 years. She never, ever missed a week. And that is you to be credited for that. And both our daughters and Steve and myself are very engaged in the conversation around the death penalty and the concept of rehabilitation. How would you advise us to raise the voice, to amp this up, to change what is wrong? How being so intimately involved in it as you were, would you advise us? And thank you for whatever you say. Thank you.
You know, it's a really good question, Anne, because I think about it a lot because, you know, I kind of, you know, even still going through it, even still fighting for somebody because I came to know him, I still have, there's a great big sign when you enter Indonesia that says penalty by death, right? And so there is still a part of me that is like, well, what the fuck are you bringing drugs in here for, or trying to smuggle them out when there's a huge sign? And so there, you know, I still struggled. It's quite a paradox in my head sometimes. So I guess I would have to say, and it's hard for me to admit that, you know, I want to end the death penalty. I think it's absolutely barbaric. And at the same time, there's this great big sign when you enter these countries that says penalty by death. But then, you know, you forget about the backstories of these people. A lot of the people that I met in the jail, a lot of these women that are in there, and, you know, drugs that are hidden in people's bags, and a lot of the mules, they don't even know they're carrying drugs. And so it's such so many levels to this story. And I guess my question to you would be, like, it depends on, you know, are we talking about Indonesia or Singapore, or you know, it really depends on the country how you need to approach it, because, you know, like for me, and I'm all over the place, I'm not really answering your question right now, and I apologize, but it, like, you know, I kind of get I'm kind of I don't know, sorry.
Well, I think your nervous system's trying to make sense out of it because it was the law. And yes, I guess my question, it can't be made sense of. And I think my question is global. You know, if you look at the data coming out of Texas and other places where the death penalty's been in strong force for a long time, many mistakes have been made. Many mistakes have been made. And it seems like global warming or plastic. Some people are awake to this reality, and other people just, it has no resting place in their brain at all. And you raised a tremendous amount of awareness around an individual, but also around all of the realities around the imprisonment and the lack of rehabilitation, and then the final death sentencing. And yeah, just was wondering how you would, if you had the bugle, how you would call us to action.
Oh God, I'm going to think about it, and I'm going to email you.
All right, sweetheart.
Yeah,
I love you, and I'm so grateful for your story, and I'm so grateful for you on this planet. So you're off the hook, not to worry.
Yeah, I feel, you know, I haven't really thought about it.
Okay.
Honestly, I've been very removed for a couple of years out of the jail, and I was lucky to get other yogis to go in there, even though, you know, they would go in there for like maybe 3 months at a time and teach some classes. And I was really lucky to not have to be involved in it, because again, it like fucked me up. So I don't know, you know, what I would do, but I'll definitely think about it and help you with whatever you need.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Anne. And so now we have Sandra, and then Steve has a question after that.
Thanks, Chris. And thank you, Denise, for sharing your story. It's really amazing to hear it firsthand from you and your experiences. As an Australian, I just really remember when the Bali Nine first were captured and made all the headlines. There was a lot of, I guess, you know, a lot of people were, sorry, I just lost my notes. A lot of people were really angry and didn't have much compassion, especially for the, you know, I think it was Andrew Chan and Mayu was seen as the ringleaders.
Yeah.
So there were some stories that came out about the younger members of the Bali Nine, and there were a lot of people rallying around and saying how they were just pawns in this bigger, I guess, scheme.
Big ring. Yeah.
And many people pointed to Mayu and Andrew as the ringleaders who were the real criminals in this. And then things went quiet, you know, as they do. And it wasn't until people became more aware that they were going to be executed that the Australian public started seeing that they had made these amazing changes in their lives and everything that you've described. And also, I believe Andrew became a minister. Like there was some...
He did.
Yeah, some amazing... So we didn't really... I don't remember really hearing about it as much till the end. And I was working in the media at the time, and there were a lot of people trying to get his story out. And there were interviews with a well-known Australian artist, Ben Quilty, who'd done a lot of work in the prison. So my question to you is, you might not have had a chance to kind of talk to them about this, but where do you think the turning point came for him and for Andrew, you know, from being, you know, if there was a turning point, like from being, you know, from willingly going into quite, you know, a full-on crime, knowing the consequences, to being able to turn their lives around so much and to have so much empathy and perspective and compassion. I mean, was that always there, or was there a turning point that you were able to witness to them becoming, you know, aware of what they'd done and the type of people they want to be?
Yeah, you know, they were really young when they were arrested, and they were like 18 and 19 years old, and I, you know, I didn't meet Mayu until he had done the turnaround already, but he and I did talk about it a lot, and he's been very open about, you know, kind of what a jerk he was, and he just wanted, you know, he met these guys, you know, they weren't really the ringleaders. He and Andrew weren't like the top level, you know, there were a lot of people above them, and, you know, they were kind of like the almost like lower level, and they just would get these little pawns who were the lowest level. They weren't like high up in the you know, the as far as the ring went, but he's very open and honest about being young and stupid and not having a lot of money growing up and wanting these things that he saw these other guys have. You know, they had cars and clothes and girls and all this stuff, and he and Andrew were just, you know, kind of stupid teenagers that wanted that stuff. And he's openly admitted it and feels a lot of remorse. He never considered the families that were affected. You know, I mean, they were smuggling heroin out of Bali and into Australia, which is why Australia was so upset. You know, they were pissed off at these guys. And the turnaround, I think, was just them, or I don't know about Andrew per se, but with Mayu, I think he really just kind of grew up a little bit. You know, the first few years, even in Kobakan, were really hard because he still had a really bad attitude. And I think he just, you know, what he shared with me was one day he was like, why am I such an asshole? And he really just thought, how can I improve everybody's life? And in that, you know, in the process of improving everybody else's life, he improved as a human being. And it's always the process that works. You know, he's like, let's get a library, let's do this other stuff, and let's have stuff here that we can do. And so by just creating these programs, it opened up a whole new level of who he was as a human being. And he's really honest about, you know, he was just a dumb shit. And he was just doing...
Yeah, it was just such a shame that I think in the Australian media, you never really got to see that side. You did with some of the young kids that were caught up in the Bali Nine, but for those two, there was not a lot of compassion until the end. And it was kind
not
of...
until the end.
Fortunately,
and a lot of the, you know, like the younger kids that were in it, she was so young, and you know, and they finally gave full confessions and kind of ratted out Andrew and Mayu to get lesser sentences, to just get life sentences. And you know, there was a huge feud going on within the Bali Nine, within the jail, because of all this stuff. But at some point, you know, they all kind of resigned themselves to, this was going to be what their life was life in prison or execution, and how to make the most of it. You know, a lot of them got transferred out of Probacan already. So anyway. I think it's unfortunate. There are some good interviews with Mayu, you know, where he has, you know, there's a lot of humility, and there are some good interviews with him out there, fortunately. But you're right, it wasn't until the very end when all of a sudden there was all this demand for mercy for these guys. But you know, how often do we get to see rehabilitation like so in our face in such a three-ring circuit, you know? I just remember thinking,
it was just of all the examples of someone who's, you know, rehabilitated, to then for it to end the way it did.
That he made a point of, you know, like, well, yeah, he's done all these wonderful things, but I need to make.
And the other really sad thing I remember I was in the car when the news bulletin came on to say that they'd been executed. Yeah. And I was just stopped, and I was absolutely stunned, and it was just so sad. And then kind of you didn't hear much of that. Was kind of it, and all that build up to trying to have it revoked. Just everything, you know, politically, everything went quiet, and it was just like, you know, business as usual the next day. And it was,
you know, I literally flew back to Bali on that Tuesday that they were killed, and taught a 9 a.m. yoga class at the yoga barn on Wednesday. It was like, talk about business as usual, man. It was, you know, just, I mean, it was just so weird. And I think that everybody was in shock on a certain level. Like, we could, you know, Australia, people supporting him in Indonesia were like, I can't believe this, like it actually happened, you know, where that huge buildup, and then it was just done.
Well, thank you for sharing anyway, that perspective. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sandra. And just a quick, then we'll go to Steve, and then Joe has, but Fabrice just had a quick question that follows on from that. He was just saying, is there a documentary, or do you know of any documentaries that are coming up about the Bali Nine, Denise, quickly? And then we'll go to you, Steve.
I just recently saw that, did they make a movie about Mayu? I don't really know. I think they made a movie about him in Australia, and I saw some guy being interviewed that played him, but I honestly don't know. I really don't know.
Okay, somebody Google it. Somebody Google it.
Google
All right, Steve, you've been patient. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Denise. Thanks for your service. And I'm going to have to Google the Bali Nine. But I was wondering if you could speak about the moth. I remember you telling me about a moth. Is this the same story?
Yes. Okay. I was able to hold it together until this moment. Okay. So
I think it's powerful. And I'll put myself back on mute. Thanks a lot.
Okay, great. I will tell the story because it really helped me, even though I was in shock for a couple of years, not knowing which, you know, if I was turning left or right. I really didn't know what happened to a couple of years of my life after that, to be honest. But I got back on a Tuesday night, and my son, so this was 5 years ago, so he was 11. And I got home, and it was dark, and my son got home, and I got home late from the airport. And we were sitting in my room with a light on, just sitting kind of cross-legged on my bed facing each other. And this huge moth flies into my room. And like, we know moth behavior, they kind of flicker around the light, they land on the curtains, right? That's kind of moth behavior. And so this moth happened to circle around mine and my son's head 3 times in a clockwise direction. And then it flew over Charlie's head and kind of flew over his head for a minute. And Charlie looked at me, and my son is quite intuitive, and he looked at me and he said, "It's Mayu." And then this moth flew over and landed on my head. And I said, and we just kind of stared at each other for a moment. And I said, "I'm okay, Mayu. Everything's going to be okay." And it got up and flew out of my bedroom. So then a few weeks later, I'm on my motorbike driving down the street. And I don't know if you guys think I'm whack or whatever, but but I'm driving on my motorbike, and this red dragonfly kind of pulls up next to me as I'm driving my scooter, and it flew next to me for like a few kilometers, and I had to stop, and it landed on my bike and then like stayed with me. And then when we started taking off again, it would fly, but fly next to us. It wouldn't stay on the bike. It would like fly right by my head. And I was just like, get the fuck out of here. I'm fine. It was just, it was like, does that sound crazy? But anyway, that's the story of the moth.
Yeah.
And
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks.
you betcha. And then I ended up with a moth tattoo.
That's right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know everybody on this call, but the people who I do know on this call, I think I could say with some level of confidence that we don't think your story is crazy. So I think it's a really fantastic, beautiful story. So, okay, Joe had a question, and we're at 8:30 right now. We usually keep it to about an hour,
Okay.
but we still have a little bit more time for questions and things like that. So just raise your hand or wave or put it up there. And also Sally very kindly put up the movie. It's called on the chat. It's called She Thinks It's Guilty, and that she just put up there. So you guys can check the chat for that. Okay, Joe, you had a question. Go ahead.
Thank you for that.
I was just gonna say that, I mean, for as you tell his story, whenever you tell his story, and how good it is at making people feel who he was and all that. And I remember you had talked about hoping you could be part of a story about Mayu, and because when I hear people talking about what the impression of him was in Australia, and then also the irony that I think you said he started drug rehab programs in the prison. So and then I do hope if there is a movie on him that these young kids that make bad decisions are getting executed. Meanwhile, people developing Oxycontin, getting all kinds of people addicted, and yet they get to live in the high life. So I feel like I hope there's a movie done sometime or at some point where it really brings in the hypocrisy and who he was. Like, it wasn't just he redeemed himself, he was actually helping so many people. And
every program that he started, and I'm glad that you brought that up, thanks for reminding me, every program, I mean, he started over 40 programs in the jail, and in order to be a part of a program, you had to be clean. You could not be use the library or take boxing lessons or anything. You had to be clean to be a part of the programs. Yeah.
Didn't they get food? Didn't he give them food because the jail doesn't provide enough food?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he fed a lot of people and kept a lot of people clean and safe. And yeah, I mean, it's remarkable. He just ended up being a really remarkable human being. And I think he always was. I don't think that he changed as a person so much. He changed his focus and changed his direction. But I don't think he was never not a remarkable human being, just from knowing his family and you know, knowing his mother and his father, I think he was always, we're all remarkable human beings, and we all have these hidden gifts that we can share with others, and as you know, as long as we get the right inspiration to do it. And I guess that's what Kurobukan was for him.
Yeah, that's nice. And the thanks, Joe. And Fabrice, we're going to go to you, but kind of just, Sally was just throwing in there the question, do you know, are there programs still going on at Karabokan? I mean, I know Cole did some of your programs, but do you know if other stuff is still going on? And then we'll go to you, Fabrice.
Yeah, I think the women's program was kind of on and off. I think Cole's not doing it anymore, but she did it for a couple of months for me, which was super helpful. And then other than that, I don't really know. I still have a lot of contacts inside the jail that I talk to. But I do know the jewelry is still strong, and there is still some stuff going on. A lot of the programs kind of dissolved, kind of withered away, like his t-shirt silk screen business, and you know, a lot of those kind of programs kind of withered away. But the silversmithing program is amazing, and you guys should check out Mule's Jewels, because that is C.E. Chen's business that he started inside, and it just goes to support rehabilitating more prisoners that are inside. So all of the prisoners that work for him that he teaches silversmithing to, that's, you know, it's still one of those programs that is really empowering and gives somebody skills once they get out.
That's great. Thank you. Go ahead, Fabrice.
Yep, thank you, Chris. Hi, Denise. Thank you for your story. Very moving, very powerful. In regards to the documentary question I had before, I really hope that if there's a proper documentary or movie that has been done about his story, that you'd be approached to be some kind of consultant, or just get a real insight into what his life was like, because you've seen it firsthand, and that would be most likely the most accurate story that one could get. And I hope that eventuates at some point.
Yeah, I hope that I would be too. You know, I might just be that yoga teacher that was there. You know, I don't really know, but I mean, I definitely have the inside scoop on what went down.
So my question actually builds on what what Chris just said. So I personally have been here for almost 11 years now in Bali, and I very quickly in my time here, I've been reading Hotel K, Song in Bali, Operation Playboy. So all these books are all connected and all cover the same story. And very fascinated by all these stories. And I think over the years, many years ago, I actually thought about wanting to do something at Kurobukan prison. And to be honest, at the time I walked away from it because I was just not sure about what my motivation was, because I was reading all these books, all these stories about it, and I didn't know, was it driven by just curiosity of what's going in there, or is there what was my real motivation? And I could not answer that question, so I walked away from the whole thing, because I didn't want it to be a voyeurism action, so to say. I wanted it to be something with meaning, and that meant something. So my question to you is twofold. One is, what is there that can still be done by us who are here and could potentially help and have some meaningful action in Kurobukan prison? And then I think it's not meant for anybody, because my feeling is that you would need to have a very strong mind, very strong feelings. You got to be able to handle being in there. And so what would you suggest to prepare oneself mentally and emotionally to start doing any type of action in there? And what would you suggest that we could do to support these prisoners who might need it, even if it's just going there and sitting and talking, because they might need somebody to talk to. So I haven't been there. I'm not sure what it is that they need.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I appreciate that, and I also appreciate your thoughtfulness around the voyeuristic kind of mentality that some people have. I did have a few yoga teachers that would come in there with me sometimes, and I'm very, I felt very protective about the inmates because there was such a level of curiosity that people had. They really just kind of they wanted to see Heather and Tommy and, Chappelle Corby and all these prisoners. And it was more of a voyeuristic thing, and rather than coming from a place of service. So I always felt very protective about who I would bring in there with me to teach, or who I would offer, to hand the program off to. So I appreciate that, because there is that element to a lot of the people that go in there and want to start programs. A lot of people do it because they get attention, and there's a level of curiosity about, like, what's this place like? But I think that what's really required is if you can set a commitment to doing it for a particular amount of time. I think that, it's a little bit of a paradox, because I think the inmates, they'll do anything just for something different to do for 90 minutes in a day. And yet at the same time, they don't want people just to come and go. They really want commitment. So if there's something you feel like you can offer by way of a class, or, Dharma talks, or some sort of men's group, or anything, and we can take this offline, and I can help you, and I can connect you with some of the guys in there that can help you get this started too, if you want. But really think about what it is that you want to do, and how much time are you willing to commit to it, and what is the purpose of it? What do you want to get out of it? And I think that's really important to understand. It's a really hard place to be, and are you willing, to keep going back, and to not feel sorry for anybody, but to really just show up with service and not feel like you're going to save anybody. It's these weird little thin edges that you're walking on when you're in there, but you have to just really be okay with committing to something, even if you feel sick when you leave, because you will.
Well,
Okay.
I think,
Thank you very much.
I hope that helps. But just email me. Yeah, email me.
Denise?
And there's a lot of sickening shit you're going to see there. Yeah.
Yeah, Denise, I would just add, having watched both my daughters go through what you inspired them to do, is they do need resources and a process around them, because when you see something that doesn't translate and you go back into the quote normal world, where people either don't give a flip about what you've been doing or couldn't process it if they tried, we need resources around people doing this great work. It's not easy.
Yeah, it's not easy. And there aren't any, I don't know that maybe that's what I'll start doing, is creating some sort of resources for people that are doing that kind of work, because it's a whole different world that you're stepping into. But I'm happy to help you.
well, I think that is a really nice way of just wrapping up. And as I'm looking at the screen here, it makes me really happy, because earlier I said there's 3 continents. There's actually 4. So sorry about that to my Australian friends down there. I keep remembering that you're not just a big island, but a continent. And so, but we have 4 continents on this call linked together, talking about, not just the story about these men in prison that, we tend to generalize and do, but really about the humanity that goes on around these. And I'm just reading one more thing here. Oh, if someone could please just post the link to the silversmith jewelry.
I will do that.
That would be great. And I also just reposted Denise's information there, again at the bottom of the chat. But I just want to say one final thing. I mean, you heard Anne, who was, she and Steve were green school parents, and Denise had such a positive influence on her 2 kids. Well, Denise also is a aerobic silks teacher and taught our daughter for a long time in
aerial.
In aerial silks, you know. Anyways, it was wild, and even my son did it. Our son did it for a little bit, and anyway, she just does a lot of really good stuff, and you're just
Badass.
unique. So let's just give her a really nice round of applause and thumbs up, and a big hug to her, and a thank you. And but thank you everybody for being part of this call, and thank you, Denise, because you're in Arizona.
Thank you.
So it's 9:45 there now, so thanks for staying up late for us. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thanks, you guys. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it. And just message me if you have any questions, and I'll help in whatever way I can. You guys are great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Denise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yep, so long.
Thank you,
Everybody take
Denise.
care.
Thank you,
Nice
Denise.
to meet each
Thank
other.
you.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Denise,
Bye.
stay for a second.
Yeah. I will.
Okay, good. No, not right now. Come say hi.
Chenoa,
Oh, Chenoa, there's
get
Denise.
your little butt over here. Get over here. Oh my God.
Do you want to know, Denise, when she was doing aerobic aerials? We got it set up here, right? And it's been years since you abandoned us. And I'm kidding, no.
No guilt.
No, I'm kidding. But what was so funny, you know Nar? You know Narayan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he and Chayton are friends. So we've just put up the silks, and then Nar they come out. Chayton and Nar are all like these big guys now, and the silks are hanging there. And Chenoa hasn't done it in a while, so she's just doing things. Well, then all of a sudden, just from that one class Chayton had with you, but now he's like tall and teenager, he goes running up the silks and then starts doing that bicycle thing.
Yeah.
But
oh my God.
It was such a shock. And then Nar is laughing, I'm laughing. Like it was just so, I couldn't believe it had stayed with him, like that one day with you. And anyway, we miss you like crazy. And when are you coming back?
Oh, you don't even know. I can't wait. Let Charlie graduate high school and I'll be back.
Yeah, I just saw Charlie too. He's taller than Denise now. So
is Charlie there?
Yeah, do you want to see him?
Yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah, go grab him.
Charlie, come here. Come say hi to Chenoa and her mom.
Hey, it's nice for all you others who are still on the line right now listening and things like that. So Denise, Chenoa, how you doing? How's your quest project?
I don't wanna.
Here, hold on.
Here comes Charlie.
Charlie, come say hi to Chenoa and her mom, Joanna.
Oh, say hi. Did you like pull him out of?
No, stick your little head up there so Charlie can see. You know.
Come on. Hey, Charlie.
I am. Thanks.
Hey guys.
Look at Chenoa.
Jaden, can you come say hi? Where are you? Where are you, Charlie? I'm forgetting. Sorry, I don't remember what I had for dinner, so I can't remember.
We're in Phoenix.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I hope you guys can come and stay with us when you come back.
Yeah, we will.
Bye.
Bye.
You did your bit, Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie. And Denise, you'll be happy to know that name that's there, Eleanor Ward, that is my mom. So she has been listening to your call as well. So there are 3 generations of my family on this call right now. So good job, Denise.
Thank you. Well, you know what? I posted this on Facebook, and you know who liked it was Mayu's mother. And I about like fell over.
Okay.
I was like, holy shit.
Oh, wow. You're no kidding.
Yeah, I was
Oh,
like,
wow.
oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that was, yeah.
Well, maybe we can now, I hopefully people check out your, what you do and everything like that. And also, but maybe we can get you to do an online yoga class for us. I mean, no rush, because we're going to keep doing online classes even next year when things open up. It'd be really fun to keep that connection with you and
Yeah, totally.
maybe do something like that. And that'd be really fun. So
Absolutely. You guys are family. I appreciate it. Thank you.
that's cool.
And
All
nice
right.
to meet you, Eleanor. Yeah.
Well, she probably, I'm not sure if she knows how to unmute, so she's probably waving at you furiously to say to say thank you, but she's downstairs. So anyways, well, all right, everybody. Well, it's nice. I'm going to stop the